Some are joining us possibly for the first time. Strictly speaking, we haven't done Tanya for a couple of weeks. We're doing some building blocks, hopefully, of sort of mystical stuff, which might help us when we go back to Tanya, hopefully, not too distant future. So we learned about the 10 Sefirot. I know it was quite quick, and there's probably a lot more to do on them, but we're going to park them for now. Sure. I don't claim to be any expert on it, so feel free to ask. Here we go. So, hi, Michael. So I'm going to share. I was just saying, I'm not Michael.
Yeah.
I'm not muting people because it keeps not letting me unmute. So basically, if you think you're being noisy, mute yourself. Okay.
Well, I'm not because I've got headphones on, so it's all right.
On your
yeah, on my
phone. Man now, not just you personally. I'm saying anyone.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay. By the way, did you see my message? I don't know how we would do it with social distancing, but we can possibly adjust your tefillin to help you. Okay.
I've got your chat head open.
Sometimes they just need adjusting.
Taken,
okay, right. I'm going to share. I don't know. I'm going to share the screen. I think it was taken at Hanukkah. Okay, off we go. Okay. So a quick recap. 1 second. Okay.
I thought you didn't share the screen.
That worked. I did. No, I don't let you share. 1 second.
That's
supposed to be sharing.
That's a bit sad.
Okay, just keep chatting for. There we go. Can everyone see that? 5 levels of the soul. Is that coming up?
Yes.
Got it.
Okay, great. All right. Hopefully it will keep coming. Okay. So just to recap very quickly what we talked about with the 10 Sefirot. You have Chochmah, Bina, and Dat, which are the first 3, which is where the acronym of Chabad comes from, which is associated with intellectual knowledge and understanding and deep connection through study, through knowledge, through Torah particularly. Then we have Chesed, Gevurah, and Tiferet, which are emotions. Chesed is kindness and mercy. Gevurah is discipline, and we explained why there's a place for both of those. Right? So Gevurah is often about boundaries. We have Tiferet, which is harmony between them. Then we have the last 4, Netzach, which is endurance and victory, Hod, which is glory, which we didn't totally explain so well, and Yesod, which is the foundation, the building blocks that holds everything up, which is why it's the lowest one there, right? So we've got a sort of almost a human body there. We've got intellect is in the head, the emotions are close to the heart, right, and the gut, and then you've got right at the bottom you have Malchus, which on the one hand is sovereignty and kingship, but interestingly it's at the bottom. Now it sometimes appears at the top as well. And we spoke about this here. On this one, you've got Malchus in the middle there. Why? Because we spoke about this, that the idea of service, not everyone's a big royalist here, I know, but perhaps some members of the royal family come across as more with a sense of service and duty. Perhaps the Queen does, perhaps some of the younger ones sometimes come across a bit entitled, I don't know. But we spoke about this, that when you're in a position of service, I suppose it's the same when you're a rabbi. And on the one hand, you obviously occupy a position of authority in the hierarchy, which you could say is at the top. We like to say it's lonely at the top, but then your whole being is to serve others. So in a sense, you're at the bottom holding it up. So we find the same with Malchus as a sphera. It's sort of, on the one hand, it's at the top of the pile, but on the other hand, it's the bottom holding everything up. Anyway, we'll try to do some more on those as we go along, but that's the 10th Sefirot. We read about them when we count the Omer and various other places. Okay, next thing is the 5 levels of the soul. So let's talk about the soul. I have I'll tell it now. I don't think I might. I won't say who it was. I have a friend who worked for Aish, and they were looking at doing some rebranding, and they will possibly look at changing the name. And the marketing expert said to them, basically, you're nuts, because people talk about being aished, right? When somebody's suddenly become very religious, so you've been aished, like you've been tangoed, I think it came from. Your name has become a verb. That is every brand's dream, is to have your name become either a verb, right? To hoover is to vacuum. Sellotape is a brand, right? In America, they talk about Band-Aids, not so much over here. For plasters, right? Coca-Cola, even when it's Pepsi, drink some Coke or whatever. It is every brand's dream to be synonymous, for that name to be synonymous with the brand. Yeah, I'm sure there's other examples as well. Can't think of any now. But anyway, So the way we use terminology can be confusing, right? Because sellotape is actually a brand, but people don't realize that. Or Scotch tape, they call it in America. Why am I saying that? Because that's how we use words often. We use words in a more generic sense. So the words we use for soul are often things like Neshama or Nephesh or Ruach. And these are general terms. A Ruach is a spirit. We don't think too much about what level of soul that means. In Kabbalistic terms, they're actually more specific words. There are 5 levels of the soul, which we'll see in a minute. So when we're dealing with oh, I'm hearing myself.
Sorry, my mistake.
Right. Oh, that's you. Okay.
That's
Right.
me. Sorry.
Okay. So talking to myself there.
I'm just starting a watch
party. The way we use terminology.
Don't do good.
Okay, no problem. So just remember to mute it. Otherwise, yeah, we hear it 5 seconds later. I've done that myself too many times with Facebook. Okay. So there are actually 5 levels of the soul. And the phrases that we hear being used, Neshama and Nephesh, just don't worry about them for now. Right. So it doesn't mean that we're wrong when we say that we're doing something like Ilui Neshama to elevate the person's Neshama, their soul. It could be sometimes we don't give enough thought to what level we're talking about, but we'll see. It'll all make sense hopefully soon. So these are the 5 levels. Where does it come from? It says in my Bar Mitzvah Seder actually, Ki chelek Hashem amo. Part of God is his people. Now we run into very interesting territory here. In the Tanya, you may have come across this possibly Rabbi Abrams, that it says that the soul of man is a part of God above. It is a part of God above. And this caused some controversy, because how can you divide God, who is infinite, into parts? How does that even work? Especially when it says literally, mamash. It can't be literal, because God is not limited into parts. He's unified and unity and oneness and everything. But anyway, it does say to be fair, in the Chumash itself, part of God is his people. How can you have a part of God? So as much as you can have a part of God without that being completely against sort of theology, we are a part of God. It says in the Torah. The Torah often speaks in what we call anthropomorphic terms. Okay? Anyone know what anthropomorphic dictionary definition is? Don't all put your hands up at once. Nice long word. Anyone? You could Google it quickly. So I always understood that anthropomorphism means ascribing human characteristics to God. So, for example, the hand of God, right, or the face of God. Actually, if you look it up, I'm fairly sure it's actually more generic than that. Anthropomorphism means the applying of human characteristics to non-human phenomena or objects. I think the dictionary says inanimate objects, but obviously God is not inanimate. So, for example, right, the table was heaving with food. Well, I mean, okay, it could be, but usually that's an anthropomorphism, right? Or the earth was trembling, or any of these kinds of things, right? So when you talk about an object moving when in a way that doesn't make any sense. So anyway, anthropomorphism. The Torah often talks about the hand of God, the finger of God. He doesn't have fingers and hands. It's a metaphor for us to understand it. Okay, it's slightly more complex to understand how our souls can be a part of God if God is not divided into parts. I suppose a slight clue to that might be the whole concept of the Sphirot, that we understood that you have this infinite light, which is boundless, which is overpowering, which is God. And then that gets filtered through various phenomena into terms that we can understand. So, for example, one of them was the midot. So God has an attribute of kindness. What do you mean? You're splitting God up into different attributes? He's one. Yes, but it manifests itself in different ways. That doesn't challenge his unity, but sometimes you see it through different prisms, different lenses, right? I suppose if you see light through a prism and you see the different colors, that doesn't change the unity of the light. It just means that you're seeing the different components of it. It's quite complicated, but it does say in Devarim that part of Hashem is his people. So in as much as Hashem can be divided into parts, which is very contentious, we are a part. We are connected to him. Right? If you'll say no problem, he's infinite, we're also infinite, but we're not. This is the catch. We're finite, we're limited. So how is a finite human being connected to the infinite God? On the mysteries of Kabbalah, we'll see a little bit of that, hopefully. Okay. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, he of Lag BaOmer fame, put it like this in the Zohar, which is more Kabbalistic. My soul is one with him as one flame, cleaving to him. Okay, so again, any good mathematicians here? You can't multiply infinity. You can't divide infinity. You can't do anything else with infinity in a sum. So it sounds very good and nice and beautiful. My soul is one with God. How does that actually work in practice? Okay, so the answer is, and this language is possibly a bit flowery, I just cut and pasted it, as it emanates from the infinite one, the Ein Sof, the unlimited one, but eventually ends up in a physical body. So how does a soul get from being godly to being in a physical body? So it descends through 5 levels. And in each of those, it leaves a route until it reaches the physical body. Now, we sort of touched on this with the Sefirot, that the closer you get to the physical world, the more concealed God becomes. So in spiritual terms, God is infinite. We see his light everywhere. But in physical terms, it's like look at the sun through dark glasses. The only way we can understand and relate to his light is through basically it being filtered in such a way that we can approach it, right? We know it says the first 2 commandments were said by God himself, and people basically passed out. They couldn't handle it. The revelation was too great. Okay, Jerusalem syndrome. Is it real? Is it, psychosomatic? It's definitely a phenomenon. People go to Jerusalem and they freak out and they lose the plot and they, whatever the incorrect terms are, no disrespect to any mental health conditions. I'm not sure what's politically correct these days, but they basically, funnily enough, in Kabbalistic terms, you would say they come out of their keli. A keli means a vessel. They basically burst out of their whatever limitation, whatever container it is. They overflow. They can't handle it. They lose it because of the spiritual revelations, possibly. Right? The prophets, it seems, I don't know where it says this. It's not explicit in the books of Nach. But the prophets, when God came to them, they didn't sit there dressed in suits and ties, all formal with black hats on, or I don't know, kittles on, or talus, or whatever. I believe they actually, sometimes they used to strip naked, which is interesting. I believe they used to roll on the ground. Basically, they would lose themselves. Because when you have a revelation of something and it's too overpowering, you lose yourself. You no longer have any inhibitions or any control. You just lose yourself, right? You lose control. So we can't handle God directly. So how does our physical body contain a spiritual soul? The answer is it has to go through different levels. And that's the 5 different levels of the soul. Or 5 levels of consciousness of God, which correspond to 5 different planes of reality, 5 levels of revelation and concealment in different worlds. So in other words, at the highest level, which by the way is called Yechidah, the soul, we're very spiritual. At the lowest level, which is called Nephesh, we're very physical, right? Even at the most physical level, the soul is still a spiritual thing. It's still something that connects and yearns for spirituality and connection to God, but it's able to survive in a physical body. How does the soul survive in a physical body? By obviously being somewhat diluted, right? So it's not like homeopathy where the more you dilute it, the stronger it becomes. It's like conventional whatever. So it's effectively been diluted a bit. Does that make any sense? Any questions? No, it's all a bit sort of abstract. Just pop them in the chat if you have any questions. Be happy to try to answer them. Don't ask about out-of-body experiences. Thank God I've never had one. Though essentially what happened at Sinai is probably the closest, according to Midrash, to how we understand not so much out-of-body experience, but near-death experiences, where people report, being overwhelmed by light and all the rest of it, and basically, being sort of blown away by it. That sounds like basically what happened at Sinai. The soul in the body is a reflection of the divine form. The divine form is called the Tselem Elokim, which is the image of God. The Tsalem in Hebrew is to take a photo, I believe. So the Tselem Elokim is the image of God, right? It says in the Torah, man was created in the image of God. So what is the mold for our physical form? It is the image of God. It's something spiritual. So again, if you're going to say it's heretical, it's against Judaism, how can you say there's a link between the infinite God and the physical person? The answer is the Torah says it. We're created in the image of God. What does that mean? How can you be created in the image of something infinite? It's very mysterious. So these levels of soul could be described as levels of awareness or communion with God. Okay, and what are they? So Hebrew words spelled in English: Nephesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya, and Yechidah. Now, just to look at them quickly, people often talk about the Nephesh, I think, when you've eaten food and you say bracha on afterwards, for example, on just a drink or something, you say the bracha goes Berei nefashot rabot v'chesed. He's created many created things, so it seems to be quite a low-level thing. Apply to food and drink as well, apparently. Ruach, we know ruach is a wind. Ruach is a spirit. Right? We talk about the ruach, the atmosphere in shul or even anywhere, not just in shul. It was a nice ruach, a nice atmosphere. So we know spirit, wind, atmosphere are things that are more ethereal. It's not solid. It's not physical in the same sense as hard sort of, it's something a bit more, wind is physical, but it's a bit more kind of abstract. Neshama is the phrase we often use for a soul, interestingly. The neshama, we say of someone who's passed on, the neshama should have an aliyah, the neshama should be elevated. Or we write in books, ilui nishmat, for the elevation of the neshama. Now, just by the way, we'll see in a moment, these three levels are intrinsic to the person, and the last two are more sort of esoteric. They're external. They connect more with God. Chaya, interestingly, can mean a wild animal, or it also means like chayot is lifeblood, and yechida is from yachid, which means singular or alone. Not to be confused with echad, which means one. So Hashem is one. He's also sometimes described as yachid, as singular and unique. Okay, we don't have to understand all of those now, but again, so Nephesh is the lowest level of the soul, which I'm not sure the exact translation. Oh, I am actually. I think it actually related to the word to breathe, interestingly. So to breathe life into something is the lowest level. Ruach is spirit. Neshama is not really translatable right now. And Chai and Yechida are the highest levels. Oh, didn't work. That was supposed to appear on that. That's annoying. Oh, no, it's not working. Okay, anyway. So yeah, the top three are internal and the bottom two are external. Okay, so again, Nefesh, Ruach, and Neshama are somehow part of you, and Chai Yechida are more external. Okay, there is a fundamental principle which we talk about a lot: the unity of the people, the unity of humanity with God, and so on. So part of that is this idea that on a soul level we're connected to God and to others. So there are certain things which are unique to us, but there are certain things that are more general that we tap into, right? When you get that feeling of connection to another person. There's a certain feeling we get when there's a tragedy in Israel or when something happens, or for that matter, you see someone celebrating a simcha and it touches you. Okay, I mean, the more sort of practical example of this, I know of stories, I'm sure others may know. Well, I'll tell you two that I know of. One is there were two ladies who were twins, not particularly religious ladies, by the way, so no reason that they would have, imagined or made it up. Traditional South African ladies. So one at the time lived in the community where we were, which was quite a distance from where the other one lived. And the other sister, the lady we knew, told us her sister was having chemotherapy. And she said, she doesn't have to tell me when her appointments are because every time she has treatment, I get a stabbing pain. She felt her sister's pain. Now, that's not a physical phenomenon. Although if anyone's read Dan Brown's, I can't remember which book it is, that talks about the, I can't remember what it's called, the thought manipulations. I don't know how this sits with Jewish belief, but we do know that thought processes are not purely abstract. They control electrical impulses. That's how Stephen Hawking was able to speak. That's how prosthetics can work that connect directly to nerve centers, because the brain does produce electrical impulses. So if there is a change in energy, then it follows that I can't remember what it's called. Follows that there could be different phenomena with that energy. How that gets transmitted to someone else in a different country, I don't know. That's beyond my pay grade. But the idea that even thoughts, what goes on inside us, produces energy. If it produces energy, it's subject to all the laws of conservation of energy and so on. Makes some sense. I can't remember what it's called. The other case I know is there was a young man called Ari Halberstam who was murdered by he was a Lebanese national, presumably terrorist, on the Brooklyn Bridge a number of years ago. Now, he wasn't even supposed to be on the Brooklyn Bridge. He was supposed to be in yeshiva. And I knew somebody that worked with his mother, and she came into the office and she suddenly sort of clutched her head and said, "Oh my gosh, something's happened to Ari." And they said, "What are you talking about?" She said, "No, I just feel it." And a few minutes later, they switched on the news and they heard there'd been a shooting. She says, "It's him." They said, "No, he's in yeshiva." She didn't know that he was on this trip. And of course, it was him. She felt it before she had the information. I'm sure we've all got stories like that. So there is certainly a notion that we can, I mean, depends, how much you believe in these things, and some people are a bit more cynical, I'm sure. But certainly you come across phenomena where there is a connection that transcends the limits of the human body. You may feel it with your spouse, you may feel it with your kids, right? I don't know. So that makes sense according to Kabbalah. There is a level of our soul which is external to us, which is beyond just what we are. Okay. So the Nephesh is very much physical, the lowest level. It's connection and awareness of the physical body and world. Okay. I speak a lot in my sermons. We speak a lot in our Monday morning share about the Jewish relationship in the Torah and the mitzvot with the physical world. Okay. Some religions have a purely spiritual bent. So that's why in many religions people choose celibacy. They'll choose to go live on a mountain or take a vow of silence, live on bread and water, basically avoid physical world and physical things because it's all, evil, sin, and so on. That's the approach of many religions to human intimacy. At the other extreme, you have, what used to be called, I suppose, a bohemian lifestyle, just eat, drink, and be merry. There's nothing else to look forward to, so make the most of life in this world, enjoy all the pleasures of this world. Judaism sits, I would say, sensibly in the middle of that. Judaism says we live in a physical world, use it, get married, have children, enjoy loving, wholesome, intimate relationship. You don't have to be celibate. Have good food and fine wine. Use it for Shabbos and Yom Tov. If you're wealthy, that's great. Thank God you've been blessed. Use that wealth to help others. Use the world around you to serve God. Right? The famous thing: gold and silver was only created for the Mishkan, for the tabernacle, to adorn it. Right? Of course, it can be abused. So in Judaism, certainly in sort of mystical view of Judaism, and this is the word mitzvah. Mitzvah means a connection. It means a connection between the physical and the spiritual. So in Judaism, we're not scared of the physical world. This is the discussion we had about the Nazir, right? Like Samson, who says, I'm going to grow my hair and I'm not going to drink wine. According to many, the Torah, he has to bring a sin offering afterwards. Why? Because he deliberately denied himself pleasures of this world of drinking wine. I'm not sure if having a haircut is a pleasure. Well, nowadays, people probably would say it is. What's the problem, right? And many people say that's very, very noble behavior. The problem is you are removing yourself from this world, right? A person might say, I'm going to stay single my whole life so I can study more Torah, do more mitzvah. I'm not distracted by having a house full of kids or a wife or having to pay a mortgage, or a husband for that matter. But that's not what Judaism says. Judaism says you have to live in this world and use this world to serve God through mitzvah. And most mitzvah, the vast majority, involve physical objects. So that's the Nephesh. The lowest soul level, it's spiritual, but it's connected very much to this world, right? Which comes with a challenge. If we're not careful, our soul gets neglected. Because if you get too focused on the physical world, right, it's all about things in moderation. Right? If people say my body is a temple, there's something wrong with that. That's not a Jewish view, right? The temple isn't your body. On the other hand, you should look after yourself. You should exercise. You should eat well and sleep enough. Why? Because then you're in fighting fit to go serve God, right? Or if a terrible virus hits, you might be slightly more better placed to fight it if you're in a healthy situation. Right? Interesting question that may come up for healthy people will be able to fast. I think by Tisha B'Av probably also, but certainly the fast of the firstborn, right? There was a question if you even need to go, we try to go Hiroshima to get out of fasting, so we celebrate the conclusion of some learning. There was a whole discussion amongst many Rabbanim. Even if you don't do that, you shouldn't be fasting because there's a pandemic going on, and there's no question that somebody not eating and drinking for 24 hours will be weaker, and if you're weaker, you're not going to be as physically fit. So it has halachic ramifications. So yes, you should look after yourself. The person takes it to extremes. Extreme physical fitness is not a Jewish value either, right? Especially when you start worshipping your body. But certainly we have a relationship with the physical world. Ruach, we know, is spirit. So it's more emotional. It says here it's more moral. We'll come back to that. That's the second level, Taya. So Nephesh is the bottom level, connection to the physical world. Ruach is more spiritual, slightly removed from the physical world. Neshama says relates to intellect and to awareness of God. So that's already much more removed from our physical world, right? You don't nourish your neshama on food and drink and sleep, but you do nourish your nefesh on that. Then you have chaya, which is a part of God. It says there, as it were. That's from the Hebrew, because if you say it's a part of God, it could be slightly sort of heretical, because we don't divide God into parts. So as it were, sort of quote unquote. That's just bad translation there. People often kavayachal is the Hebrew word. It means not literally. So a part of God metaphorically. And finally, the Yechida, which is sublime, which is one with God. Okay, that may not make sense now. We're going to come back to those in due course. Okay, we're going to have a quick look at Nephesh and then we'll finish for this week. Is that making sense to everyone? Have we totally lost our souls? No, we're okay. And it's all very,
Just a question, Rabbi.
and, yeah. Sure.
Do we kind of, are you saying that everyone moves between those soul levels, or we get one of those souls, we get a neshama?
Right, as I understand it.
The other one.
Right, so I don't think it's like the Beinani and the Rasha where you move at different levels. As far as I know, we all have these 5 levels. Now, somebody who's more spiritually attuned, presume will have, I guess it's like, percentages. How dominant, right? How dominant. It's like saying, everyone has a Yetzer Tov and a Yetzer Hara in Judaism. We basically believe, except for maybe very exceptional cases, everyone has, right, both a good and a bad inclination, but there's a different balance between them. So as I understand it, everyone will have these 5 levels of the soul. I don't know if they like divide neatly. I don't think it's a spectrum. There are 5 levels of the soul, which each have different purposes, but a person will be more in tune with a different level. So for example, if you nourish your lowest, if you don't nourish the higher levels, you won't be as spiritually attuned, if you like, right? Somebody who's very spiritually attuned will be much more in touch with the higher levels. So as far as I understand it, we all possess those levels of the soul, but how in touch we are with them is a different question, right? This is the whole kind of how we understand. This is perhaps where the Baal Shem Tov's understanding of the world was different. There are people who, it's funny. I don't know if anyone read my piece in US about education, but exam league tables. It'd be interesting to see next year when all the teachers tell the kids, you got to get your grades because otherwise they'll say, otherwise what? In 2020 they didn't do exams and they all survived. They lived to tell the tale. Some of them actually felt less pressure because of it. So do we measure things only by, measurable? How do you measure success? How do you measure attainment and performance? It's not so straightforward. So one view says, I guess, that, your soul becomes more elevated and you become more holy and spiritual. The more Torah you learn, the more mitzvot you do. There's another view, certainly, I suppose, the Hasidic view that says you are intrinsically connected because you have a soul. Whether you always recognize that, whether you always see that is a different question. So it's more a question of how in touch we are with it, but it's there, if that makes any sense. Those 5 levels are there. We may not be as in touch with them, but that's down to us. So somebody who's very physical, very material, and very materialistic is going to be less in tune with the spiritual side of things, if that makes any sense. And you can be doing mitzvot all day long, we said previously, and still be a very physical. When we say physical, I don't mean that you shouldn't be a physical person. You should be a physical person in the physical world, but what is the end goal? What is it a means to an end of a higher purpose? So we're put in this world to serve God, and we do that through eating, drinking, sleeping, getting married, building homes, having children, working and being moral and ethical in our work, and plowing the field, which is what they were sent out of the Garden of Eden to do. Or is that the whole purpose of life? If the whole purpose of life is just to make a quick buck or even a slow buck, then there's something missing. So in Judaism, it's tough because you can have 2 people leading the same life, but one of them is doing it for a higher purpose, and you wouldn't necessarily know. But my understanding is we all have these levels. We have to nurture them. So Nephesh is related to natural instinct. Ruach is related to emotion and morality. I think we just did this. Neshama, yes, we just did this. Right, there we go. Okay. I think I'm going to pause there. And next week, the cliffhanger next week, we'll actually look at the actual 5 levels. Okay, so this is quite mystical stuff, so it doesn't always totally make sense. But any more questions that I can try to deal with?
Rabbi, can you just put the last, not that slide, the one before back on?
That one?
Yeah, thank you.
So I suppose the reason that we often talk about the neshama is because that's the highest level of soul as we relate to it, personal to us. So if the first 3 levels are personal, the next 2 are more communal, then neshama is the highest level a person can have within themselves. So also, because these things are derived from the infinite God, I'm not sure that you can water them down so easily. So some things in life you can dilute something. I'm not sure it's so much diluting, it's more concealing. So we're not in tune with it because it's got fogged up by all the other things we're doing in our lives. Right? There are many times we find, we often say by an ufruf, Why do we call up a groom to the Torah? Because he's about to enter marriage, which, yes, is very spiritual and divine, but it's also very real. I mean, everything's changed nowadays. Once upon a time, you got married. That's when you moved into your first home and you started paying your mortgage. Nowadays, I don't know, either people never going to own a home or they already own one or they're already living together. But in the traditional scenario, you got married, you left your parents' home, you moved straight in with your spouse, and that's when reality hit that you've got bills to pay. So we often say that's why we call up a chatan at his ufrov, because at this time when he might start worrying very much about the reality of day-to-day life and the bills and the mortgage, we say to him, don't forget there's a higher purpose to life. Call you up to the Torah. You say a bracha on the Torah to point out and to highlight and to give you a sort of boost, a shot in the arm, that you should remember that there's more to life than just paying the mortgage. It's important to pay the mortgage. It's important to have material things and to succeed, right? In Judaism, we're not anti-enterprise or anti-success, but it should be for a higher purpose. Right? The Torah doesn't say you shouldn't make money. It says you should make money and you should give a portion to charity. It doesn't discourage enterprise, doesn't discourage, healthy, I would say capitalism, but whatever. Michael, you've got your hand up. Yeah. Hi. Oh, and Graham also. Michael first. Hi.
Can you answer me on the chat, please?
Okay. Graham.
The way you're talking, it sounds like these are all alternatives that we have, but surely, particularly with the first three, we have all of them at different levels,
Correct.
Altogether.
Correct. And hopefully we're going to see how that works, basically. We'll look at each level. You're right. So Nephesh is always going to be as we relate to physical actions in the physical world. So a lot of mitzvot relate to that. Ruach is already a bit more spiritual, possibly relates more to prayer and meditation. And Neshama is a lot more abstract. So they operate in different spheres. So you're right, we have them all, as I understand it, we have them all in tandem. If you can say that about three things, in triplicate, whatever, or in quintuplet even, whatever the word is. So yeah, it's not either or. So yeah, it's not a spectrum, right? When we were learning about the Bainani, we said almost there's a spectrum of good to evil, and someone sits somewhere on that spectrum. It's not a spectrum. These are different levels. Within each level, a person will have a different level of engagement, so the one doesn't negate the other, I think. So interestingly, just parenthetically, you can have somebody that's very spiritual, let's say, I don't know, that goes off into the forest and meditates for hours and prays and is very spiritual. They're nourishing their ruach, but perhaps doesn't look after themselves. They don't sleep enough. They don't eat well. So they're not nourishing their nefesh, the more basic level. That can definitely exist, for example. So we will see the different levels, hopefully make a little bit more sense. So thank you for joining me, everyone. Going to go have breakfast. So lovely to see so many people on. It's a record, 8 participants. And enjoy the rest of the day. It's lovely weather.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Have a good day,
Bye.
everybody.
Bye.
We're going to do the monster game now.
Agreed with that. Yes, definitely.
What
Right.
did she say?
What'd you
Hello?
say?
Okay, Michael, if you stay on for a minute, I'll just chat to you about your tefillin, okay?
Can we do it on another Zoom?
Or can we just do it on here? Because what I
Okay,
need to
fine.
tell you is, it's a bit hard to. How loose are they?
Well, every time they go around my collar, they keep falling off.
Right.
They keep going down.
Where
and
did
up.
you get them from? From Rabbi Raman?
Yeah.
Okay, the best thing is probably to somehow get them back to him when he can adjust them.
Okay. Well, I've got a lesson with him tomorrow on Zoom.
But online, presumably. Okay, have a chat with him tomorrow, right? Just ask him if he can help you adjust them. I'm not very good at doing it, to be honest. I can do it when they're physically there, but I don't know if I could show you. So he might be able to do it. You can do it. You have to loosen a certain part. You can definitely do it. It's definitely doable. Ask Rabbi Brahman. If he can't do it and he doesn't say to bring it to him, if you bring it to me, I could definitely do it. But obviously that's more difficult.
Okay.
Yeah, but ask him when you have your lesson tomorrow. Oh, so you're still having lessons. That's very nice. Good.
A BM lesson.
Yeah, but very nice. Okay. I'm going to go for now. But yeah,
Bye.
ask him. If he can't help you, let me know.
Okay.
All right. Nice to see you. Take care.